Happy day, everybody. I'm Daniel Braffman, holistic health and performance coach. And today I am discussing Maxwell Maltz's Cybernetics, Chapter 8, which is the ingredients of the success type personality. So, I know I say I'm always excited, and I am always excited, but today I'm especially interested in this chapter because we're moving past generalities into things that are a little bit more specific and a little bit more like you got to stand in the mirror and get real with yourself. In fact, it's a lot more of that. So I'm going to be really quick today because I always try to be, but I've been running over certainly more than 15 minutes. So I'm going to be kind of to the point. And without getting too deep into specifics in the chapter, because I'm going to assume that everybody who's listening to this call has exposed themselves to the information. And while this book is critically important in just about anybody's library of personal growth, being a primer the way that it is among other primers like Think and Grow Rich and some of these other books that are just must-haves, this one is, there's a lot of redundancy to all of these other, thought leaders, and that's a good thing because that gives us lots of different ways of getting messages that may be a little more resonant to us in one form than another. I know that for me, very often I'll hear the same message over and over and over again, and it won't really resonate until it comes to me in a specific form. I think this book does a really good job of offering a different way of saying that what we're after here, this success mechanism or this servo mechanism that I like to call it, this guidance system, but otherwise known as your subconscious mind, which is the part of the automatic part of the brain that is running the show, has the ability to be reprogrammed. And this is where we really start getting into that today, is in the reprogramming. And in particular, there's a section in the book where Dr. Maltz talks about, just sort of repeating yourself and repeating yourself and repeating yourself is really not what this is all about. As a matter of fact, if that were the case, then we would, for the most part, just continue to make the same mistakes over and over and over again. We tend to repeat the things that we're most familiar with, and that's what this chapter is really about, is to get honest with yourself. Pay attention to the results, and also find a handful of people who you trust will love you enough to tell you the truth. If you ask them what they think about you and what you may be doing to self-sabotage. We all do it. Unfortunately, we all also live in a world where people actually are afraid to speak the truth if they are at all in belief that you're going to hurt somebody's feelings. So part of it is us not knowing how to say something in an appropriate form. So making things in terms of I statements and feeling statements when you say to somebody, I experience you when you do X, Y, Z, which is, it's hard to find a person who has that level of emotional intelligence to be able to answer difficult questions in a way that is not guaranteed to be offensive. It's not as simple as, honey, is my ass look fat in this dress? But it kind of is. If you really love the person who asks such a loaded question, then you might want to think about working on your communication skills. We talked about that in the last chapter, and we talk about it a little bit in this chapter. We do need each other, and we do need to fortify our ability to communicate. But if we're going to benefit from our loved ones and our friendships, in a way that's really going to help us grow, then we need to find, by giving what we wish to seek, a better way of communicating the truth without being offensive. So no you statements, and no absolute statements either, but, to be able to be honest with somebody, because this really does, it gets very, very specific about the fact that repeating things and repeating things and repeating things is exactly why we keep getting the same crappy results. Until you're willing to get honest with yourself and recognize what's going on within that subconscious, that servo mechanism. If you don't possess an altitude meter in your guidance system, you're going to keep flying into that mountain. It's just going to happen. It's going to happen again and again and again and again and again. And while everybody stands there and watches and goes, oh, geez, I wish they wouldn't keep doing that, you really do need to find that one person that loves you enough to say, hey, did you ever think about maybe talking to somebody who's got a really well-developed altitude meter, and they can help you? Tony Robbins, in a talk recently that I listened to, said that, it really is amazingly helpful. You take decades of your development, off of your development by finding a mentor. And what you want to do is you want to find a person who's already put in those 20 years of learning and paid attention to that entire 20 years of learning, so that you can learn from them what it took them 20 years in a matter of, anywhere from 2 weeks to a couple of months, or however long it takes you. But it's certainly not going to take you 20 years. And what he literally said was, take decades off of your development by finding people. First, you need to find people who are honest with you and who are compassionate in their honesty. Second, you need to be honest with yourself. And first and second is really the same number here. You just need to do this simultaneously. People often see us in ways that we don't and we're not capable of. So you need to borrow their lenses. You need to actually try to look through their lens. Recognize that everybody that you're dealing with is a mirror. If you're continuously getting this sort of frowning, geez, how can I get out of this conversation kind of look from people, get honest with yourself and go, wow, that's not a reflection that I really want to see. And sometimes you may not be able to do this on your own, so you do need to ask somebody, but make sure it's the right person. Don't just ask a person who is especially not as interested in personal growth as you are or as I am. Because what tends to happen is as soon as you start to show that your efforts and your attention to yourself and your personal growth is working, they're going to want to cut you down. They don't want to be left behind. So, that's, again, it's something that, throughout all of our lessons we've had to talk about, which is, when a person who might be good for you now could possibly become toxic for you. If you start to create an environment where you become a constant reminder of what they're not doing, if they're not emotionally evolved, if they're not truly supportive in a healthy love relationship with you, they're probably going to actually start kind of picking at what you're doing and start tearing you down. So, be mindful about that. And, and also be mindful that practice doesn't make perfect. That's not what Vince Lombardi said. What Vince Lombardi said is perfect practice makes perfect. So, as I said, I promised I was going to keep this call really short today. There are lots of different things that we can talk about. But as far as I'm concerned, the main message in this chapter is that you can accumulate characteristics that will make you more successful. But as I've said throughout all of my teaching, when it comes to the, my pillars of health, one of the first pillars of wellness is to detoxify the system. And that requires honesty. That requires a recognition that something that you're used to, that you have a coping mechanism for, is still harming you. It's not okay that it takes so much energy to get through your day. If it does, you need to find areas where there's a lot of friction to your success, And you need to also find the areas where there's no friction to your failures. Because when we repeat something, the friction diminishes. The resistance to something diminishes. And your guidance system doesn't really care if it's a positive or a negative. It has no way of judging. It just says yes to everything. Yes, oh, that's easy. Let's do that. So I'm going to leave you on this note because I'm taking a stand, and I'm taking a stand very, very vocally and very definitively. It's a wonderful thing to be able to go into a class. I'm dealing with this all the time, and I'm taking a ton of yoga classes in this gym that I've joined, and I love doing it. But I also bump into myself around a message because this corporation has taken on a track of saying, hey, the particulars don't matter. Just come here. It's all yoga. It's all this. It's all that. And, I just disagree with that. I disagree with the fact that, your body has a wisdom and that, it will give you what you need. Your body will give you what is easiest. And what you need sometimes is stress. You actually need something that's challenging, that's difficult. And it's not that it's hard. It's that it actually takes your attention, high levels of attention, to make a change. And then you repeat it and you repeat it and repeat it. And eventually, with a high level of attention, you will create a sense of ease about what makes things better for you. But until you do it on purpose and until you repeat it and are very, very consistent, it won't get any easier. You can't just show up to the gym one day a month, work your ass off, stay sore for the next 5 days, do it again in a month, and expect to get anything other than a miserable experience once a month. You're not going to make any gains. You're going to learn to really despise the effort and the gym in particular because your result is always going to be miserable. And the same thing is happening in our lives. Get honest with ourselves. I don't mean to sound like I'm being rough or that I'm being, kind of an in-your-face. I'm going through this myself. I'm constantly going through this myself. Right now, personally, I'm dealing with this with some very, very big issues with some what I'll just be willing to call addictions to drama. And I got to tell you, I'm really glad that I've got loving people in my world who have said exactly what I needed to hear, which is you need to step outside of this space. You need to actually just give it a break so you can figure out how deep, you've harmed yourself. And then really get in touch with what it feels like, what the experience is like. You need to set goals. You absolutely need to set goals. And in setting those goals, yes, there are externalities that help us stay motivated. We live in a very materialistic world, and I am not going to lie about that and say, well, I'm not motivated by maybe getting a cool watch or a new car or any of those other things. I mean, they are appealing to me. But the most important thing that I want to make sure that I tap into is what it feels like to continuously accomplish something and move on and accomplish something else. Because that's the good feeling that lasts. The actually achieving a goal and then having nothing left to aspire to, it just leaves you with an emptiness. It's like a moment of joy followed by a void. And that's what I hope that we can avoid. So peace out, everybody. Thank you very much. I hope this was helpful. I look forward to speaking to you next week.